This hearing to order. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our final operating budget hearing. Today's hearing marks the 8th hearing for this year's operating budget, and we'll go over last year's revenue results, the current state of our budget, and the amendments council plans to make to the budget this coming Monday. Starting December of last year up until now, Council has held 7 thematic operating budget hearings that discuss appropriations and priorities that reflect the city's current needs and challenges. I am grateful to my council colleagues for leading those various conversations, and I'm grateful to the department leadership and our community partners for joining us in those conversations as we identified our most pressing needs. Unlike in previous years where budget discussions pick up from a point of fiscal strength, this year is the first time in a very long time that our city has missed our revenue estimate and also finished the year in a deficit. Which means that unlike past budgets, we ended 2024 in a slight deficit and not a surplus. Over the last few weeks, my office led deliberations with the administration in consultation with my colleagues to find a solution for our approximately $1.5 million revenue shortfall and dollars for additional initiatives and earmarks that are necessary to keep our city moving forward. This afternoon, we will present and discuss those solutions and earmarks. Our auditor is here, Auditor Kilgore, as well as our Director of Finance, Director Long. Before I move forward, do you have any additional comments to add regarding last year, our revenue shortfall that we see in this year's budget? And our Director, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, President Hardin, Chair Bankston, members of council. Appreciate this opportunity to talk about the 2025 operating budget. Correct. It's, our region is still growing. The Central Ohio region is still growing. I know Auditor Kilgore has comments that she will be sharing around our regional growth, but it's also true that our operating expenses continue to outpace some of that growth. And the simple truth of the matter is, the Central Ohio region is still suffering from this inflationary environment that we find ourselves in. And so that's impacted the cost of all city inputs, including labor, supplies, and services. And so that's really kind of the driving factor behind why we had a shortfall.
Thank you for that, Director. Is it fair to say that we are, I think you said it's still growing, but it's simply that our operating expenses are outpacing that growth?
Yes, thank you, Chair Banks. So that's absolutely correct. Our region is still growing, our city is still growing, both economically and from economic activity. But again, the COVID pandemic and the inflationary environment that is still very much in effect and in place nationally and regionally has impacted our cost. Again, labor, supplies, services, utilities, we're seeing it across the board.
And is there any particular portion that is growing the most? I mean, personnel, healthcare, I'm guessing, those types of areas?
Yes, thank you, Chair Banks. We're really seeing it across the board, from fleet parts and services to our negotiated labor contracts, our health insurance rates, just various supplies and services. It's really pretty much across the board. I'm not aware of any category where we've seen cost decreases, at least in a material fashion.
Got it. Yes, we are still waiting for the price of eggs to go down, apparently. Could you talk about ARPA and CARES and its impact, and twofold? One, I think, on how critical it was to shore up where we are today, but then also the impacts of what that has had on our current situation.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair Bankston, President Hardin, members, council. Yes, it was the effects of ARPA and CARES are really twofold. One, those federal revenue sources helped us to fund various services in our communities. Number one, it provided as a safety net to our citizens, our community partners. And so with those funds, no longer being available, there's a cost side. Certain costs we're no longer able to charge to ARPA and CARES as those programs are no longer really in effect, right? ARPA's in wind down. The second side, or the other side of that equation is certain of those dollars the city was able to use for revenue replacement. So it's perfectly allowable under those programs. The city did use certain ARPA dollars to fund revenue replacement, meaning lost revenue from the fiscal impacts of the COVID pandemic. And with those programs winding down, those dollars aren't available for revenue replacement anymore. So the city's had to incur additional costs. We've had to deal with the lingering effects of the pandemic and the inflationary environment and the economic shocks, but those programs are no longer available. And so those revenue sources associated with those programs are no longer available.
Thank you for that, and just a point of privilege just to point out the Biden-Harris administration, and again, want to thank them for their leadership and foresight to be able to make those investments, because we would be talking about, I think, a very different picture today. Thank you for that. Madam Auditor, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak to just our revenue estimate, the budget, anything that you want to add before we continue.
I'd be happy to. President Hardin, Chair Bankston, members of council. I'm going to do probably, to keep things simple, I'll first address the revenue estimate, and then I'll also speak a little bit to, I think, our collaborative comments that I share with Mr. Long around the state of the economy and just how it pertains to our tax base. So starting with, really our city's 2025 revenue estimate, including the adjustments that you're talking about today and will be heard at this Monday, February 3rd's proposed council agenda. We want to just disclose, the adjustments that will occur to the city's revenue estimate. And so as you correctly referenced, at the end of 12/31, the first adjustment that we are acknowledging is that there will be a reduction of about $9.57 million, and that reflects two specific areas. One is a lower than anticipated December 31st ending fund balance. Correctly, the ending fund balance was about $1.6 million lower than originally projected. That was because of our revenue estimate, which was about $778,000 off. We anticipated that we would be right on the money. We were really, really close. But as a result of technology, that's what allowed us, in the investments that you've made, that's what allowed us to get that close. We typically see a lot of changes in December around seasonality, workers. You could imagine the pace of that goes through the holiday season. And so we always know that we experience some, fluctuations that are, let's say, not seen throughout the rest of the year. But we were hoping for a little bit more aggressive holiday season, and we came in just a little bit less than anticipated by about $780,000. Making up that additional difference was that expenditures were also up a little bit, about 790, as I recall, 1,000, thereabouts. And so those two items is why, collectively, the ending fund balance was a little bit down. In addition to that, the passage of Ordinance 3436 directed an estimated $8 million in adult use cannabis tax revenue to the special revenue fund instead of the general fund. And so that's why that reduction is going to be occurring when we formally publish our revenue estimate update on Monday. So $9.57 million down. The other side is the anticipation that, contingent upon your actions on Monday, we will also have an increase of $7.85 million as a result of two adjustments. One is a $6.28 million adjustment from encumbrance cancellations, resulting to a contract modification, as well as about $1.56 million from dormant funds being transferred to the general operating fund. So with these changes, we will prepare for you a formal update, and then for today's purposes, your updated estimate of available resources for the city's general fund is now $1.226 billion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Madam Auditor. And I think that we're just talking about this so that we can be transparent, but I want to give you a chance to comment as well, that we're talking about being off by less than $1 million and being over expenditures by, again, less than $1 million. Put that just in perspective again of all of the revenue, because I want folks to understand that, yes, it's tight, but we're still growing, that there are cities that still would envy the position that we are in. So if you could just, I think, give some context to that so that we understand.
Yeah, we've really
that.
challenged ourselves too, in the office, through the use of enhancements in technology, to get kind of our estimates tighter, and we're able to do so. So it's very much a positive reflection of being more capable in the area of like the business of government. But it's very important to decouple that from any indication of a lack of, expected or anticipated economic performance. So to that, I think just from some color commentary, Columbus remains really, really well positioned despite our continued, especially headwinds at the federal level. We have to acknowledge that since the original 2025 revenue estimate, which we published on October 29th, there have been some serious changes at the federal landscape. Sizable shifts with new executive orders, policy changes, and that certainly could impact our local economy and therefore our tax base. So while these changes are unfolding, we're monitoring that really closely to see how that might translate down to our near-term and our long-term financial planning. That said, however, Columbus continues to benefit from a strong job market, our population growth, and certainly sectoral diversity amongst all of our types of employers. It's one of the strongest things that we have in our economy here. Our income tax revenue makes up today about 76% of the total general fund, and we're anticipating that we grow by about 3% over 2024, driven by, number one, is certainly the continued job creation in especially sectors such as healthcare and technology-oriented jobs. Number two is continued wage growth, both in terms of the type of existing jobs we have, but also in the future jobs that I know we are attracting. The third would be simply our attractiveness to new residents, particularly young professionals relocating right now from other cities. And fourth, indications, and this is something that has also picked up speed since our last formal revenue estimate, but indications from some of our corporations inside of the city that they are putting forth return to work plans. And so we do anticipate, that certainly suggests that we will see some of those tax revenues coming back into Columbus. So all of those, four items are certainly worth acknowledging, continuing, our Columbus trajectory. In terms of challenges, really the only thing that I would say we're keeping our close eye on would be declining employment in the sectors that we kind of know, manufacturing, transportation, and retail. So we're keeping an eye on there, but all told, Columbus remains in an enviable and strong financial position. I have to acknowledge that a lot of that is due to your stewardship, your thoughtful financial management, and owning what we can control. There's a lot of things that in our financial picture we cannot control, but when we optimize and really own what we can and make really good, thoughtful decisions, it pays off. And that has to be acknowledged, especially in light of, fiscal challenges federally. As always, our office appreciates the partnership as well.
Thank you for that, Madam Auditor. Before I move on, any questions or comments from any of my colleagues for Director Long or for Auditor Kilgore? All right, seeing none, we'll just keep moving along. I would now like to pass the mic to our Legislative Research Office Director, Matt Erickson, for a presentation on Council's proposed amendments. And before you go, Matt, just want to thank you and your team for all the work that you all have put in. Oftentimes, it is us as elected officials up here have these crazy ideas and things that we want to get done, but it is you and your team and folks behind the scenes here who are public servants that really help us get that done and figure it out. So thank you so much to you and your team. And with that, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council President, Chair Bankston, members of council. I want to talk a little bit about largely what we expect to see on Monday's agenda, the amendments to the operating budget. The budget itself, what we consider to be the operating budget, is really a collection of three separate ordinances, what we kind of colloquially refer to as the general fund ordinance, which provides appropriations for all revenue that comes into the general fund, as the auditor just described, what we call the other funds ordinance. And this tends to be appropriations associated with special revenue funds. It supports departments like Recreation and Parks and Building and Zoning Services and some of the other non-general fund sources. And then third, we have what we refer to as the Select Other Funds Ordinance. In this case, Ordinance 3037. And that's largely associated with things like debt service, appropriations for TIF funds, and other statutorily required appropriations. We've talked a lot, obviously, about the situation that we were budgeting within. We know that at the end of the year, the cash balance was less than we expected. The auditor's estimate dated January 2nd reflects a total decrease of about $9.5 million. As has been previously mentioned, only about 1.567 million of that is associated with actual revenue and or expenditure changes that were unexpected. I was similarly planning to offer my own praise for the auditor's stunningly close revenue estimates. We've had years in the past where the auditor has had an opportunity to, or the inclination to update her revenue estimate as the year goes on because of changing financial situations. Typically, it's because of positive situations. Through the first half of last year, we were experiencing, I think, what everybody kind of saw as lower income tax receipts than we would have been expecting. And there was a point at which we probably would have expected a revenue revision downward. But the auditor was consistent in saying, we have a good handle on what we're expecting. So again, the auditor missed by less than $800,000 for full year 2024 revenue for an estimate that her office completed in October of 2023. So just offering my own praise for that degree of accuracy. And then as also mentioned, the $8 million that the auditor originally included in the revenue estimate associated with cannabis tax revenue, council adopted Ordinance 3436 on December 18th to establish the Cannabis Host Community Special Revenue Fund. And so therefore we have to strip that $8 million out of the auditor's revenue estimate. As she's already done, we have to strip it out of the general fund budget. Just as a note for anybody who may not be aware, we're under the same requirements as any other municipality in Ohio as a function of the Ohio Constitution that council has to adopt a balanced budget. And so if we have removed $8 million from the general fund through legislative action, we obviously have to accommodate that. It's not a real reduction in what we would refer to as the all funds budgets, the collection of both the general fund and the other funds ordinances, because we are simply moving $8 million from the general fund over to the other funds ordinance, and I'll explain that just a little bit. But the upshot, obviously, is that we have to accommodate a approximately $9.5 million reduction to the general fund ordinance. How we have actually accomplished that in coordination with the administration on many of these efforts is we are reducing the services budget in the facilities management division in the Department of Finance by a little over $1.5 million. The administration has determined that they're able to shift some of the funding obligations associated with some of the contracts within that division over to what we refer to as a General Permanent Improvement Fund, or GPIF. This is a capital-like fund that derives its proceeds from the sale of city assets. And so there are eligible expenses that can be spent against that particular fund. In terms of moving the expenditures associated with the cannabis host city special revenue fund, those are being shifted over within the Department of Development. They are almost entirely associated with the city's human services support, and so those contracts, as opposed to being supported by the general fund, will now be supported by the cannabis host community special revenue fund. So those actions essentially take care of the shortage that the auditor identified on January 2nd. As was also previously mentioned by the auditor, in terms of how we investigated to derive some additional resources that could be used for budgetary purposes, we're expecting Ordinance 3242, 2025 to appear on Council's agenda for passage on Monday to modify that contract with the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio. And that will provide additional resources of about $6.3 million. Going through the process with the administration to identify what we've sort of, again, colloquially referred to as dormant funds, just really trying to mine what we could to leverage for the operating budget. We identified a little over $1.5 million, working with the city attorney's office to identify a process by which we could utilize those funds. I'm expecting Resolution 29X and Ordinance 347, 2025 to also appear on Council's agenda for the 3rd. And then subsequently, I'm expecting the auditor would update a revenue estimate between February 3rd and February 10th. The upshot is, I don't necessarily want to read out that entire $1.2 billion figure, but that is the combination of the reduced revenue estimate from January 2nd and the additional resources we have identified. The net change in the administration's proposed 2025 budget is approximately $1.7 million, less than what was originally proposed. So how we're actually, some of the other actions by which we are moving some things around the budget. We are shifting some expenses associated with code enforcement officers within the Department of Building and Zoning Services. Those expenses are now shared between the general fund and what we refer to as the Development Services Fund. And the Development Services Fund is going to bear a slightly larger portion of those expenses, approximately $800,000. Reducing economic development incentive payments that are currently budgeted within the citywide transfer line within finance by approximately $1 million. And then there are some funds that we identified going through that dormant fund evaluation period that we can use to support some existing personnel expenses, just under $50,000. And again, reducing those, the funds are already budgeted in council means that they can be reallocated for different purposes. So in terms of those anticipated use of those funds, we're talking about approximately $11.6 million. And that's a combination of both the revenue that we have derived, some existing cash balances. And I know council members, I'm expecting to hear from council members about what it is that those funds are going to be used for, but to my understanding, a significant portion of that is going to be used to increase support for Community Shelter Board, to sustain the Columbus Promise program. And then we have some existing, city has some existing programs that are specific to housing and homelessness, economic development and small business, workforce development, civil rights protections, and then safe and strong neighborhoods. In terms of those next steps, just from a technical perspective, we are amending the general fund ordinance and the other funds ordinance. Those are ordinances 3035 and 3036, 2024. We'll do that on February 3rd, on Monday. Section 27 of City Charter governs a portion of council's consideration of the budget, and just specifically, it essentially says that council cannot amend and pass the operating budget on the same agenda. The nature of council's amendments have to appear at least once in the city bulletin between amendment and passage, and so the nature of those amendments will be published in the city bulletin on February 8th. And then I would expect all three ordinances associated with the operating budget to appear on council's agenda for February 10th for passage. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Erickson, and again, thank you to your whole team for the work you put in. Before we move into my colleagues and their remarks on and their individual earmarks and I think, will be in priorities for this year. Are there any questions or comments directly for Director Erickson? All right. Seeing none, we will now just go around the dais and provide opportunity for my colleagues to talk about priorities that they have reflected in this budget. And again, want to put in layman's terms that this council worked very hard to get in an additional $11.6 million back into the budget for earmarks. And I wouldn't say earmarks, but priorities that this council feel are necessary for our community to continue to move forward. And so with that, with no order, who wants to go first? Oh, okay, well, Councilmember Diakar just instructed me that we're just going to go around the dais. So with that, clerk, call the roll. No, I'm just joking. We'll go to Councilmember Barosa de Padilla.
First, I would like to also extend a thank you, Chair, and also Director, for all of your work on the budget. We have had many conversations about how tight this budget is, and so I think the work that we did to ensure that some of the priorities and to be clear, this isn't just this council's priorities, it's the community's priorities, and what the community has instructed us about what the priorities are, and being able to look at the budget and ensure that we are still meeting folks where they are, that we are still meeting the needs of our community, that we're continuing with some of the existing programming that we have set up, I think is key. So I just wanted to also acknowledge all the hard work that went into this. I remain committed to keeping our residents and communities safe, ensuring that every Columbus family has access to the legal protections that they deserve. That's why we fought to secure continued funding for the Columbus Families Together Fund, which provides critical legal assistance to immigrants and migrants at risk of deportation. Originally established in 2017 by then Councilmember Liz Brown and sustained by Councilmember Shayla Favor, this initiative has made a tangible difference in protecting our neighbors. Through grants to organizations like Advocates for Basic Legal Equality, We Are Able, we are supporting Know Your Rights programming and direct legal aid to those in need. We are also taking steps to strengthen our city's support for immigrant and refugee communities. This Monday, applications will go live for our newly formed Commission on Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, which will ensure that the voices of these communities are heard at the highest levels of city government. Portions of this funding will support the Commission's community engagement. And lastly, this funding will allow us to respond to emergency needs faced by the community as they navigate a shifting national landscape. Now more than ever, we must stand firm in our commitment to welcoming and protecting all residents. This investment affirms that Columbus is a city where every family, regardless of background, has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Diakar.
Thank you, Councilmember Bankston, and thank you so much for the tremendous leadership that you have shown during these past 2 months and the work with our director here on just pulling together a budget during tough times. Your advocacy of these important budget amendments demonstrates your commitment to looking after our residents during this tight budget year. I want to thank the Departments of Neighborhood and Recreation and Parks for their partnership in ensuring their critical needs were funded in the budget. And I'm pleased that we're able to work out funding for the mandatory Rec and Park employee trainings, as well as staffing for our brand new Fran Ryan Center. In our current political climate, combined with the need for prudence in this operating budget, it's important that we are fiscally responsible while still responding to the diverse needs of our community, including being mindful of our city's vulnerable populations and special populations that don't always come out on the top of everyone's minds. I've advocated for funding to support 2 of these populations, our military veterans and our aging population. Since becoming chair of Veterans Affairs in June, I've made intentional efforts to reach out to our veterans and veteran organizations serving Columbus to learn about their needs and how the city can be supportive. And during these last 6 months, we hosted a myriad of events to both support and celebrate our military veterans and their families, And thanks to these budget amendments, we will now be able to continue this important work in 2025. Franklin County is home to one of the largest veteran populations in Ohio, and it is a priority of mine to ensure that Columbus is a city where veterans can not just live and work, but also thrive. Looking out for our aging residents is another priority of mine, one that I've been working on long before I came to council. Our older adult population is often overlooked in American society, underlined by the stories we hear often about older adults struggling to make ends meet, affording to stay in their homes, and experiencing isolation. We have a strong network of village programs in the city that work tirelessly to ensure that older residents can age in place successfully and be a part of communities that band together to look after their mature neighbors. I'm grateful for Councilmember Bankston's advocacy for my budget amendment to support older adult programming so I can continue to help these impactful organizations. In closing, while these budget talks were hard and they were difficult, those tough decisions had to be made. And this council has stayed true to its values and has presented amendments that help meet many of the critical needs in our city. So again, thank you, Councilmember Bankston and our director and his staff for all their hard work on this year's budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just want to commend also, I think, your efforts, particularly around advocating for our seniors, particularly the Fran Ryan Center. I jokingly said behind the scenes when we were doing this, I said that Councilmember Day Ackhauer is the president of the Recreation and Parks Fan Club because she was going hard for that, and so really glad that we were able to work that out. So thank you for your advocacy. With that, Councilmember Dorns, President Pro Tem Dorns.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I want to thank certainly you and your staff and Director Erickson for all their work in the many months leading us up here today. But also just want to take a chance to thank Interim Director Chris Long and certainly folks in the administration. I think in my 6 years on council, this has been the most transparent back and forth between the administration and council. Tough years tend to allow you to do that a little bit more when you have tough decisions to make. And, having folks like Interim Director and certainly the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Elon Sims, to have those tough discussions with to make sure that we're here today in a way in which this budget is not perfect. No budget is, but this is as close as we could get to serving the residents with the dollars that we have in the door. And that's a credit, I think, to both sides of the building working as well together, particularly over the last few weeks to get us here today. So certainly want to thank folks for that. Two areas when we talk about sort of the budget from my perspective is that we know as Columbus continues to grow that many of our residents have not always had the opportunity to enjoy the economic stability that growth has brought to lots in our community. And that's when we, renamed and reevaluated our committees here on council. We created the Workforce Education Labor Committee to create a renewed focus here in City Hall and certainly at council on how we can invest in workforce development efforts, particularly for young people in our immigrant community as well, to make sure that they have the opportunity to enjoy the type of economic stability that other folks in the community have. So this budget continues to make strategic investments in workforce development. Those investments will continue to roll out through that workforce committee over the years or throughout the year, and very, very pleased that we were able to, again, add additional capacity to be able to support those efforts. Because we know every dollar that is invested in workforce means that is an individual in our community that has more stability to make sure they're putting food on the table for their families. They have the opportunity to take care of the people in their lives, which builds a stronger community. So very, very appreciative of being able to have those dollars in this budget, again, to help families in our community better themselves through better career opportunities. The other area that I'm very, very pleased to look at in this budget is that, last year we passed the first phase of Zone In, our city's historic modernization of our zoning code. The whole goal and that initial effort was to create more housing in our community. But one thing we heard loud and clear from folks was real concerns around how that zoning update would affect historical preservation in our community. Columbus at times has been a place that has not always done the hard work to preserve the history that we have here in Columbus. And what we've done with this budget as well is to find some funding basically for us to be able to work with partners externally to the city to actually create a more holistic approach to actual historical preservation. It's no secret that Columbus is growing, and certainly our efforts to modernize our zoning code are going to continue. So this seems like a appropriate time to take that very valid criticism, I think, from that first phase of our zoning our zoning reform efforts. Two, bring a more holistic approach to how are we going to ensure that history is in fact preserved in the city of Columbus as we continue to grow. So very excited for those two amendments, but very proud of all my colleagues for really, and again, in a tough budget year, really identifying for themselves and their offices what they really want to lean into this year to make sure that we're making Columbus a resilient community as we continue to face not only what's going on here, the headwinds in Central Ohio, but those that are coming across the country. So thanks to all my colleagues for their hard work with the chair on this budget.
Thank you, President Pro Tem, and looking forward to continue that work with zoning. And as you said, as we continue to grow, it's not just about adding to our city, but also protecting our legacy. So thank you for that in your advocacy. Councilmember Green.
Thank you so much, Chair Bankston. I also just want to echo gratitude that the rest of our colleagues have shared to you for your work in getting us to where we are, and I know that it wasn't easy, and I just value and appreciate you so much in your leadership. I'm also really grateful to have been able to identify some additional dollars that we're going to reinvest into further supporting gaps across our community service sector and our continuums of care. We know we've heard a lot today about the impact of COVID dollars dropping off on the city budget and how that has impacted our ability to shore up our core infrastructure here. And we're not the only ones. Our community serving sector, our tax exempt business sector are feeling the same pinches as we are here. And we know that what we have currently is not going to be enough to bridge every single gap in our community, either from those that we've heard from throughout our budget process or from the many others that we haven't. And I also think it's important to acknowledge the current budget constraints that we're facing right now in the context of the roller coaster that I think we've all been on this week, where the current administration at the federal level has been recklessly threatening to freeze federal grants and loans and financial assistance program, which if that was enacted would result in $63 million shortfall into our community service sector here in Central Ohio alone, disrupting critical life-saving services from being able to reach 188,586 of our most vulnerable friends, neighbors, and loved ones, and putting at least 1,000 workers across our nonprofit sector's jobs at risk. And so while we are really happy to have been able to identify additional funds to try to get us through this budget process, I am also equally energized and looking forward to working with all of our colleagues and the administration and our partners across the community as we're looking forward in 2025 to work as quickly as we can to identify alternate opportunities for revenue and sustainable funding streams that we're going to be able to utilize to stabilize and preserve those critical pieces of human infrastructure that are so integral to keeping food on tables and roofs over heads and mental health services when within reach and support for our seniors and people with disabilities and so much other important work that we have ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Green, and thank you for, I think, your continued advocacy for our human service sector and our tax exempt businesses. It is not missed on me, I think, or this council, and I hope that the community also know that it is not missed on this council, the advocacy and the urgency. And so I think we'll talk a little bit later in this hearing about FRAC and some of the things we want to do to make sure that we ensure that, shore up that sector. But thank you so much for your advocacy. Truly a social worker at heart, and truly someone who has a heart for not just that sector, but for our people. So thank you for always putting that center. Councilmember Remy.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is really one of the most challenging budgets we've seen since the Great Recession, almost 15 years ago, or a little beyond 15 years. So tough one. And so a lot of thanks needs to go out to the team, Director Long, Director Erickson, Madam Auditor, Chair Bankston. Despite the challenges that we face ahead of us because of this budget, we have come up with a workable solution for now, and it certainly wouldn't have been done without the cooperation of everyone that has been mentioned here today. And so strong leadership, goes a long way, especially in troubling times, and strong leadership in this city makes a big difference when we see the challenges at the state and federal levels. So, as Chair of Public Safety, my ultimate concerns are our Columbus residents feeling safe in our community. And so, I'm excited to continue to support the various initiatives that both of our divisions of fire and division of police do in our community with our residents to make sure that people feel safe in their homes and on the streets in every neighborhood in the city of Columbus. And so we'll continue to do that type of work with this budget. A couple of initiatives that are important to me are that have been successful throughout the last few years is our Cleaner Columbus initiative, which is keeping our streets clean, working to enforce illegal dumping, getting those people that are taking to our alleys and our streets and disregarding the residents' will of having a clean community. We're going after those people. We are prosecuting those people with great success. And we'll continue to invest in that program to make sure that we partner with our organizations around the city to help those that are underemployed and unemployed to work to keep our streets clean. The other initiative that will continue to be supported in this budget is our Project Taillight, which we have helped over 400 of our residents repair their cars so they can get to their daycare, they can get to their jobs, they can get to their medical appointments, and we'll be continuing that work because it's so important. Besides having a home, transportation is the second most important thing. So we will get through this. And again, I can't say enough the leadership that it took to get here today. We'll continue to lead, and we will continue to make sure that we are touching our residents in every single way, the right way every time. And so thank you again, Chair, and the team that worked to put this together today. We certainly appreciate all the hard work and look forward to passing this budget.
Thank you, Council Member. And I think it goes without saying that safety is all of our number one priority. And so thank you for your continued advocacy and also making sure that Columbus is greener and safer. Cleaner and safer. Sorry. Councilmember White just handling green stuff. So, and with that, Councilmember White, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And first, let me commend you on setting it up this way where everyone has to sing your praises before we talk about this. I will also add a little G&A and say thank you to you and your staff, the LRO team, as well as the administration.
I only wrote my own talking points, so I'm not sure.
For working together to get us here. I mean, it's been mentioned by everyone on this dais how tight this budget is, which should highlight to the public that while the allocated amounts may be lower than we all wanted, these earmarks reflect our deep commitment to these community supports. And one of our major priorities is building up climate resiliency. By identifying climate risks in suitable community-based entities for resilience hubs locations as outlined in our 2025 Climate Action Plan goals. These resiliency hubs are a community-based solution designed to provide support, resources, and coordination during climate-related emergencies, acting as a central point for residents to access information, shelter, and essential services when facing extreme weather events like heat waves and cold snaps, helping our communities build climate resilience. Our hope is that these hubs will have a higher utilization rate when there is consistency and early dissemination of location information. We often find ourselves reacting to extreme weather events and notifying the public where they can go for supports almost the same day. That is why we have earmarked funds for a resiliency hub pilot to allow for consistency and more options for our vulnerable communities to utilize when the weather reaches dangerous temperatures. While it's not well known, extreme heat is responsible for the highest number of annual deaths among weather-related hazards. And people exposed to extreme cold are susceptible to frostbite and can succumb to hypothermia in matters of minutes. This fund will save lives and allow us to gather data on where support gaps exist and what hubs are most utilized to continue to improve and expand community support. So I just want to thank you again for fighting for this initiative, especially in a tight budget. Trying to start a new pilot is hard to kind of get over the finish line. So I appreciate you pushing on our behalf to ensure that these funds were included.
Yeah, and thank you for pushing all of us to continue to think about sustainability And I know that in many cases, when we talk about things like this, it seems that that could fall on as lower on the priority scale, if you will. But when we think about climate change and what is happening, it is not just affecting people that live on coasts or people that live in the South. It is something that is impacting us here that we have to take serious. And so thank you for your advocacy. But also, I think with this pilot, it's important to point out that it dovetails into so many of our other priorities, particularly around our unhoused population. So thank you for your advocacy. Before we go to Council President, I do want to just talk very briefly about the Economic Development Small Minority Business Committee. Given the nature of this year's budget, I have chosen to focus on the continuation of 2 small business programs that have had incredible impact on the minority small business ecosystem. The Urban Business Connection Program in partnership with the Columbus Chamber and Columbus Urban League, and continuation of the Minority Business Program through Experience Columbus. Both of these programs give minority businesses access to a wealth of resources, guidance, and connections via memberships to both the Columbus Chamber and Experience Columbus, in addition to amplified services to help them continue to grow as a business and also amplify their messages. Over 200 small businesses have been served between these 2 programs, which has led to the incredible success stories of businesses such as Black Kahawa Coffee, which we will be cutting doing the grand opening just tomorrow, Kennedy's Cakes, Posh Tea Time, H&H Luxury, and more. And these are all businesses that are Black, women-owned, minority-owned businesses. And in a time where initiatives that support diversity, equity, and inclusion are under attack, I am proud to double down in my support of programs that uplift the economic backbone of our city and the source of our growth. Our small businesses are the lifeblood of our community, and we have to ensure that we are removing barriers, particularly for minority and women-owned businesses, so that they are able to succeed. And so I want to thank all of my colleagues, but in particular, I want to thank my partner in good and my vice chair of economic development, Councilmember Rosa de Padilla, who also shares this passion. And when you think about what she has been doing with doubling down on making sure that families feel safe in this community, that I don't want to speak for all of my colleagues, but I think I can say with clarity that we believe that diversity is our strength, and that we will not shy away from that. And so we will continue to make those investments unapologetically and continue to make sure that Columbus is a place where everyone can thrive. And even though there were many competing priorities, and I wish that there are a lot of things that have been funded in the past, could get funded, as you have seen that this year's budget is tighter. So these 2 programs, with the great impact that they have had, were prioritized for me. With that, we'll close with Council President Hartley.
Thank you, Chair Bankston. Anyone who has been coming to council the last few weeks of this new year know that the council meetings have been shorter. That's because we haven't had money to spend. So I want to start by thanking and encouraging folks to thank Councilmember Bankston for bringing us this budget, which will elongate our council meetings. So thank you for making council longer in the future. I've been thinking about how I wanted to give my appreciation to Councilmember Bankston. He says that he already knew what I was going to say. Thank you for the great process you ran. But he really did run an amazing process. There are a lot of things to go around. Budgets are value propositions. They are value documents. And the document that we received from the mayor's office in November was really good. And the work between November and today has been council adding our values to those documents. And in such a tight season, that can be difficult. And the nimbleness that not only Chair Bankston, but his staff, my chief of staff, John Tanous, the mayor's chief of staff, Elon Sims, the new director, Long, put towards this process, it really should be commended. Talking to the chief of staff, the mayor's chief of staff yesterday around the process. This was done differently this time, and I think it made it better. And so to my director of finance, Matt Erickson, and everyone who worked on this, just thank you. The values that we wanted to bring to this document from my vantage point first was around our shelter system and making sure that it was kept intact. That was a top concern for me and for my colleagues that we talked about, making sure that CSB had what they need. I said at our Housing, Homelessness, and Building Committee hearing last week that Columbus is a big city with big problems, which meant that we needed big solutions. And so we believe, this council and this administration, that it is our entire community's responsibility to make sure that our unhoused residents are supported, and we will do that in this budget. Secondly, we will continue to invest in the Columbus Promise program, which empowers Columbus City school students to get to and through college. We see this work very similar to my Pres Pro Tem investment in workforce development, that when you make these investments in our people, that they actually pay dividends back into our community. And third, speaking personally for my office, I'm working on an amendment to earmark some dollars for initiatives that we'll undertake this year connected to future growth. I've said it several times that all of us who are working adults, the thing that will most impact us if we are living and working in Columbus will be growth and how we work to make it work for us and for our communities, and see if we can answer that larger question or meet that larger experiment. Can we get better as we get bigger? And so we will be exploring those conversations this year and trying to put forward initiatives and policies that will help us manage that growth and make sure that it is truly good for everyone. Again, thank you so much, Chair Bankston. Really proud of your leadership, and look forward to voting on this budget.
Thank you, President Harding. Thank you for your leadership as well of this body. And I think in all the conversations, keeping us centered on our unhoused population, as well as making the critical investments in our future through Columbus Promise. And as you always say, and I think it's a moniker for us, is that it's not about getting bigger, but it's how do we get better as we get bigger. And I think that this budget helps us to continue that effort. Now we will move to public comment portion of the hearing, because I know you all are tired of hearing me talk. And today, as of today at 9 a.m.'s deadline, we have three pieces of written testimony, as well as 3 speaker slips. Really quickly, I just want to make sure I acknowledge that those written testimonies are from Ann Bischoff, the CEO of Star House, Judge Paley with the County Municipal Court, and Betsy Pandora, the Executive Director of Short North Alliance. With that, we'll move into our first speaker, Sarah DeMio. Welcome to council. And as you come, you'll have 3 minutes, and just let us know any organization you're representing.
Hello, good afternoon, City Council President Hardin and council members. My name is Cassandra Aguirre Ramirez. I am the proud daughter of 2 immigrant parents and serve as a team leader of the Soy Latina program at the Ohio Hispanic Coalition, Central Ohio's only Latino community-based nonprofit organization. Our coalition has served nearly 82,000 individuals, providing critical resources and a sense of belonging to a community that is often overlooked and underfunded. The Ohio Hispanic Coalition's mission is to improve the well-being and quality of life for the Latino and Hispanic community in Central Ohio. We provide bilingual and bicultural direct services in education, workforce development, victim advocacy, and health services. Programs like Soy Latina empower victims of domestic violence and other programs through medical and legal advocacy. Our promotora specialists help families navigate legal systems and provide culturally appropriate education. Columbus is a home to a growing Hispanic and Latino community, now making up nearly 7.9% of the city's population, with about 51% of our population of Mexican origin and the remaining from Puerto Rican, Central American, and South American backgrounds. Despite our contributions, our community continues to face systemic barriers. Growing up, my parents relied on me to be their voice in a world that didn't speak their language. As a child, I should have been focused on the simple joys of childhood, but instead, I found myself interpreting at doctor's appointments, critical conversations, and filling out paperwork. I had to grow up quickly, shouldering responsibilities that no child should bear, sacrificing my innocence to help my family navigate a world that refuses to understand us and the many others who live the same story. Too often, when referring to our community, the word illegal is used, dehumanizing us. Let me tell you, we are not illegal, we are not immigrants, we are family. This language matters. It shapes perceptions and policies, and it keeps up the systemic inequities we face. Our community contributes so much to the city, yet we are constantly overlooked and undervalued. This neglect is reflected in the resources and the lack of funding provided to us for the programs that support Latino and Hispanic families. Families that struggle to access healthcare, education, and social services prevent them from thriving. At the Ohio Hispanic Coalition, we're working to change this. We help families access education, healthcare, and social support, while creating a space where the Latino and Hispanic community is seen, valued, and celebrated. Investing in our community straightens not just one group, but strengthens our entire city. When we thrive, Columbus thrives. I urge you to support our work so that no child has to sacrifice their childhood to fill in the gaps of a broken system like I did. Thank you for your time and your consideration to ensuring that every voice in our city is heard and valued. At this time, my team and I are happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Councilmember Rosa De Padilla?
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. You know that I am an advocate for the Ohio Hispanic Coalition. It's one of our oldest organizations serving the city. And so I think we've had conversations about how do we continue to support the work of the coalition moving forward, and how do we continue, especially as we think about all of our social services across the board, and when we think about social services that directly impact communities that, you know, they're going to go to those organizations because it's a trusted source, because it's culturally competent, because it's in their language, because they have trust when they wouldn't go to maybe other organizations. And so this is a continued conversation that I want to ensure that not only we engage on, but also with the rest of my colleagues here, because that makes all of our conversations easier when it comes to making decisions together. So I just want to thank you again for your advocacy. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for all of the work that you do, not only in the Latino community, because we know that when you invest in the people who are furthest away from justice, all boats rise. And so by investing in the Latino community, you're investing in the community as a whole. And so that is not something that is lost on us, certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your advocacy. Next, we have Glenn Dumala. All right. I saw him earlier. He may be out in the hallway, so we'll go to the next speaker and then come back. Mr. Charles Abernathy, Jr.
All right. Thank you so much for the chance to speak. Like many of you, I deeply care about Columbus. I've seen firsthand how systems designed to help often perpetuate harm, whatever it's in housing, police, or bureaucracy. I also believe in the power of community-driven solutions to turn crises into opportunities. And today I want to share with some opportunities that we can work together to build systems rooted in laws of mutuality, dignity, and reciprocity. Values I know many of us hold. Please Please make a public statement to discourage law enforcement for participating in deportation, create productive administrative barriers to delay deportation, fast-track citizenship, stop the CSB evictions that are happening this weekend, dismantle or at least chisel away qualified immunity, and stop or at least make it very hard to send hundreds of millions of dollars to fund genocide. And please, for God's sakes, don't buy the $1 million apartheid technology called Spot Shooter that will be used in Black and Hispanic communities. The current struggles in the global business, city planning, and social service programs is moving away from short-term bottom-line thinking and achieve greater sustainability through long-term and inclusive lens. As a pro-sci certified change practitioner working at a top 15 Fortune 500 company, I empower leaders to adopt strategies co-created with those most impacted. My work has a 70% full adoption rate in complex multinational systems. Last year, I've helped 1,000 leaders and employees move to a new way of being and building foundations of curiosity and improvement. But my greatest teachers are those of the working class, who are Black, brown, white, poor, queer, and from immigrant communities here in Columbus, who've shown us that they could survive, but I don't want to make resilient communities. I want them to thrive and be secure to achieve their wildest dreams. We are stuck in a cycle of short-term thinking, trickle-down economics, MBA approaches, prioritizing profits over people, discrediting lean management principles, and policing systems and criminalizing poverty. These are not just flawed policies, these are design failures that cost lives. When Columbus Housing Authority cuts ties with their Section 8 contractor after years of tenant and landlord harm, it proves that systems not built with communities will fail communities. Your declarations to make communities safe, but homeless has increased, police violence continues, following your orders, and you can't fool the working class so easily. What if we redirected resources towards prevention instead of punishment? Cities like Denver has reduced homelessness by 30% by funding mental health response and over police. Imagine investing $200 million away from the police budget to housing, job programs, and trauma-informed care designed by people who need them the most. This isn't idealism, this is data-driven strategies. And I just want us to realize that if the Nazification of Project 2025 can be implemented to build infrastructures to empower the police, the opposite can be true, and a better infrastructure can be created to support the working class. If China can do it, we can do it too.
Oh, thank you for your testimony. Any questions or comments for Mr. Abernathy?
Abernathy? Wait, don't leave, come back. I so deeply support your advocacy, and one thing I would encourage you to do is I would love to meet with you. I would love to sit down for coffee or have meetings, because I think, I often share this, I think that this is a good platform, right, to get messages out that people will see. It's sometimes hard for us to have a conversation. It's also weird. We're here, you're there, there's a million people, all the things. And so I would really encourage you to reach out to our offices if there's specific things that we're working on, because I would love to talk to you. I'd love to share some of the things that we're doing. I'd love to hear some of the ideas that you have, because one of the things that resonated with me today when you spoke is, how do we do this together? And one thing that we know to be true, especially in these days and times, is that we need advocates, right? We need to be working together. We're not always going to agree. We're not always going to come together on approach, but we can come together on compromise. And so I want to be sure that all of the good ideas are not just things that we post about or we come and we talk about here, but that we can actually implement together. So I would love for you to reach out and invite you to reach out to my colleagues as well. And so Jocelyn, who is, I think, out in the hallway, if you want to share your contact info with her, and then we can connect.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I think for me, compromise is not working with the ruling class who have historically exploited us. And I think we need to be smarter in terms of how we prioritize our goals to help the most vulnerable. I think you said, rising tides raise all like ships. That's very true. And I think we all need to question the MBA approaches of the social crisis that are completely manufactured by the ruling class, those who have no interest in supporting us. And I'm also tired of yelling at you all. I'm exhausted. And someone told me that maybe I can turn on the sweetness a little bit and see what can happen, even though I'm not guaranteed to live in that ideal like future. But people before me and after me can think about what we can contribute to that. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I think we're all tired, and I think if we can find ways that we can work together, I would love to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker, Glenn Dumala.
Hello, City Council. My name is Glenn Tumala. My beautiful wife and I live on the east side. We love Columbus. Kate Curry de Souza, Shanice Green, Tim Fulton, Robert Lice, Dorothy Malone, Lisa Mosky, Bailey Phillips, Denzel R. Portonis, Jesse Vogel. These people are awesome. These were the 9 other people that did not get chosen to fill the seat over there. And I want to go on the record to say that I totally want to be their friends, because they took the time and effort out of their life to put out an application and come here and speak because they care about Columbus and they care about our future. And I want to encourage them, don't give up. Those 9 people, don't give up. No, you were not chosen to fill that city council seat. Someone else was. But I'm urging you, I'm begging you, don't give up on Columbus. Keep asking questions. Questions are a sign of intelligence, and we need more people asking questions. You took the time and effort to do that, and I totally want to be your friend because you love Columbus. And we have so many things still to work on, and we need more citizens involved. We need precinct voting. Yes, I saw someone nod up there. Yes, we need precinct voting so that the council members actually represent the communities that they live in. We still need a master plan for the city. Tony Celebrezzi, who I love that guy. He already let me know that he doesn't have time to do that, which is too bad because all the other cities in Ohio have master plans except for us. We need a real climate change. You're awesome, but you're getting little pieces done in a climate change plan. And we really need to reallocate our funds and move towards actually addressing climate instead of a 2050 deadline. We deserve better for that. We also need, there's so many other things to do, but thank you so much to those 9 wonderful people, Kate, Shanice, Tim, Robert, Dorothy, Lisa, Bailey, Denzel, and Jesse. I hope that I run into you next time that I'm at, I don't know, Taco Bell. I will totally buy you a taco at Taco Bell if I run into you, because you guys are awesome, and I want to be your friend. Thank you very much, Council. Keep up the good work, keep making good decisions, get stuff done. Climate change is real. I'm on your side. I just saw it ticket. I had to time it perfectly on that one. Don't shake your head at me. That was funny. Yeah. Keep up the great work. Thank you.
I would say, Glenn, I invite you to vote for at least 3 of those people because they are running for council if you enjoy them. I would also challenge you to maybe not go to Taco Bell, but support your local Latino businesses and buy a taco from them instead. But I love you too, Glenn, and you have a good day. Thanks for coming down here today.
No, you're right. You're right about Taco Bell. They don't need my money. Yeah. All right, I'll go somewhere else.
We'll go to Dos Hermanos.
I'm not bringing you tacos.
Thank you.
I'll bring up from Taco Bell.
Thank you for your continued advocacy, Glenn. As we near the end of this process, another process is gearing up to begin, and that is a financial review advisory committee, a process in which leaders in our region gather together to discuss creative ways to establish revenue streams that will fund our human services sector, the arts, and more. And I think when we hear time and time again at this council and throughout this process, I think it's fierce advocacy, particularly for our human services sector and the social safety net. I have always said that that sector and the work that they do is not an amenity of a big city, it is a necessity. It is a necessity that as we continue to grow, so do our issues and the pain points that our residents face. And so we are looking forward to that process to really think about and reevaluate how we are funding our human services sector, how we are funding our arts and all these other things that drive our economy, but more importantly, ensure that our families are strong and stable, and that as our city continues to grow, that we continue to make sure that we're investing in our people. That said, before we dive into that discussion on the Financial Review Advisory Committee, otherwise known as FRAC, I want to reinforce just one fact from this year's current budget process in the start of our ongoing evaluation of all funds. And I think that the FRAC is a part of that, but also during this process, we looked at our funds at the city. And so, Director Long, I should have asked this earlier, but if you can just speak to the process that Finance underwent to confirm that what we call dormant funds that have been there identified are truly dormant.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bankston, President Harden, members of council. So, yes, Chair, dormant funds are typically special revenue funds for which there's been no revenue or expenditure activity for quite some time. And so we engaged in a process on the administration side where our budget team worked with departments to just ensure that any dormant funds for which those dollars that were non-general fund in nature could be used or repurposed for general fund support, that there was no anticipated activity that was impending for those funds, either on the revenue or expenditure side. And I also just wanted to take a second, Chair, to also thank you, President Harden, Vice Chair, and President Pro Tem Dorns for a truly collaborative process. Very much appreciated. Want to thank every member of council for being part of that process as well. Thank Auditor Kilgore for her guidance and support, and Director Erickson for his partnership, and certainly Mayor Ginther and Chief of Staff Sims for their leadership and helping us all arrive at a balanced budget. Thank you.
Got it. And thank you for that. And I think those other funds that we talk about, I think, one, making sure there weren't any restrictions that would preclude us from using them. But in some cases, they were set up for a certain purpose that no longer exists. And so going through that evaluation and also seeing what departments' potential plans are for some of them. Some of them had not had activity for a couple years, but there are plans that inevitably take longer to come to fruition. And so all of that was also a part of the process, I think, that you discussed with us as well. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you again. And with that, again, speaking, and I just wanted to make sure I put a finer point on that, because when we're looking through this FRAC process, we're looking at all funds, both internal to the city, but also other sources that we could also tap into, again, to shore up some of our most critical needs. Council President, before we conclude today's hearing, did you want to give some brief remarks on just the Financial Review Advisory Committee? I know it's been a while since this community has gone through that type of process and what we can expect.
Sure. Thank you again. Something this process has made clear, the budget process has made clear to all of us, is that the time to have a broader, long-term, community-wide conversation about how we fund various critical priorities across our region is now. Back in 2011, in the wake of the recession that had impacted city finances, then Mayor Mike Coleman and then City Council President Andy Ginther convened community leaders to study how to better fund the arts, tourism, and human services related needs. As Chair Bankston said, it's called the Funding Review Advisory Committee, or the FRAC. Many of its recommendations were ultimately adopted into law and policy, including the structure of the current hotel motel tax, often called the bed tax, and the entertainment admissions fee that council adopted in 2018. As we struggle again today with the depletion of federal dollars and as our municipal budget is strained, this council agrees that it is time to have another process like that, something to get into long-term decision-making rather than one-off year-by-year decisions. We don't see this process or a FRAC as a solve-all. We're not sky or pie in the sky about it, but we do believe it's an opportunity for all the different stakeholders that have vested interest in strong tourism, health and wellness, human resources, arts, to come together to come up with longer-term solutions. Council really pushed to make sure that, no surprise to anyone, that housing and the unhoused will be centered in this conversation. And so we look forward to those conversations. We encourage folks' active participation, the ability for us all to think outside the box, for us to be willing to make difficult decisions with the future in mind. So with that, we look forward to all of us being a part of those coming conversations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, President Harden, and it's critical time and looking forward to it. I think the word of 2025 will be process, is what I'm gathering for that. So speaking of process, this year's process, though difficult, showed us the power of collaboration, of conversation, and compromise. It was not perfect, but it truly was an effort done in full partnership with all those involved. With that, I would like to again echo and give thanks to Mayor Ginther, Auditor Kilgore, Director Chris Long, and Adam Robbins from the Department of Finance and the entire Department of Finance team, the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Elon Sims, our Acting Chief of Staff, John Tanous, our Director of our Legislative Research Office, Matt Erickson, my colleagues and all of your staffs and all the work that you all put in. And also want to thank my team in particular, JP Dorval, Jonathan Brown, and Kaylin McDonald for all of the late nights, long conversations, hearing me have to cuss, all the things, and frequent updates. I really, truly appreciate you all. I think I want to always highlight a staff because, again, without them, the work that happens behind the scenes, this process would not have been at all possible. And I do want to also thank the public and thank our residents and thank our organizations that all gave testimony, that had time to come down here. Even for the gentlemen and the folks that came today, we have to have those conversations. And I know that sometimes government doesn't move at the speed, or sometimes the investment may not be as large as folks like to see, but it doesn't fall on deaf ears. I think that this body has demonstrated that when we are in dialogue and conversation with community, outcomes are better. We make better investments. When we think about things like alternative response, it's directly related to not this council just being the smartest people in the room or having the greatest idea. It was working in consultation with both partners and folks who have been critical of us. When I think about projects like the Ground Floor Growth Initiative, it has come about just because I had a great idea. It came about because of partners who came together, and so on and so forth, and we can continue to go down the list. So I'd say to the community, thank you for engaging. Thank you for coming down here. And please do not stop engaging. Even though it may seem as if it's not at the speed that you want, or it may seem as if we don't have the answer right away, let us continue to work together, because we represent you. We work for you, the people. And I think one thing that came out of all of these conversations and all of these budget discussions, Council President and my colleagues, is that what was central to all of this was always our people. At the end of the day, what investments are we making to ensure not only that when we even talk about the operations of the city, yes, we're an employer of almost 9,000 people. We have basic city services that we have to perform, but that's all about our people, delivering the best service for them. And so I just want to thank everyone in this process, but in particular, I want to thank our residents, because I know that sometimes it's wonky. Sometimes that interacting with government can seem like it's falling on deaf ears. Trust me, it is not. And that we are working behind the scenes every single day to deliver for our residents. Again, not just so that we continue to grow for growth's sake, but to make sure that that growth is leveraged so that we can continue to invest in our human capital, that we can continue to invest in our quality of life infrastructure to ensure that every resident has the ability to not simply survive in our community, but to thrive. So again, thank everyone in that process. Looking ahead, this coming Monday, Council will consider the amendments discussed today for adoption and passage, and will vote on passage of the budget the following Monday, February 10th. Throughout that process, still, please feel free to reach out to my office if you have any questions on the remainder of the process, and to continue to advocate for what you see that is necessary. And with that, thank you, everyone. I'm sorry, before I go, any closing comments from any of my colleagues? Okay. All right, with that, have a great weekend, everyone.